When the last echo of the auctioneer's voice faded in the dusty Montana air, single dad and rancher Luke Hayward stood staring at the abandoned farm he'd just purchased, a crooked fence line, a collapsing barn roof, and a house that seemed to sag under the weight of forgotten years. It wasn't much, but it was all he could afford, and as he ran a calloused hand through his hair, he whispered to himself, "We'll make it work, Joey. Somehow." His 8-year-old son, Joey, tugged at his jacket sleeve, eyes bright with that stubborn hope only children carry, and said, "Dad, this place just needs someone to care about it." Those words settled deep inside Luke's chest, as if the boy had unknowingly spoken the truth Luke hadn't yet dared to believe, that broken things didn't stay broken when love showed up for them. That evening, father and son slept on the floor of the old farmhouse, wrapped in blankets under a ceiling stained by time, dreaming of second chances. But the farm held secrets, and one chilly dawn, as Luke pushed open the back door to fetch tools from the shed, he stopped dead in his tracks. Standing by the well were two unfamiliar women, quiet, still, their long dark hair braided neatly, their posture dignified. They wore worn clothes but carried themselves with the unmistakable grace of people who understood the land far better than any map could show. Luke's instinct tightened his jaw. Strangers on a ranch usually meant trouble. But before he could speak, Joey stepped around him, offering the women a shy wave. "Hi," the boy said gently, as if talking to friends arriving early for breakfast. The taller woman placed a hand over her heart and nodded. "We didn't mean to frighten you," she said softly. "My name is Ayanna, and this is my aunt, Marala. We've been staying here." Luke blinked, confused. "Staying here? This land's been empty for years." The woman exchanged a glance with her aunt, sadness slipping into her gaze. "Empty to you," Marala said, her voice low yet steady. "But not to us. Our ancestors lived here long before the fences, long before the boards started rotting. This place, these hills, they're part of our family." Luke felt the tension between them, something old and delicate, something that had survived the erosion of time and injustice. But he also heard the exhaustion in their voices, the kind born from carrying too much alone. They weren't intruders. They weren't thieves. They were simply people holding on to the last thread of a home that had disappeared from everywhere but their hearts. Still, Luke had a kid to raise, a ranch to rebuild, and bills higher than the mountain peaks surrounding them. The responsible thing was to tell them they had to leave, and he opened his mouth to do just that, but when he looked into Ayanna's eyes, he saw something that froze him, the same quiet desperation he saw in the mirror every morning, the same silent plea for a place to stand, breathe, and rebuild. He shut his mouth. "Let's figure this out," he muttered instead. Over the next few days, life on the ranch grew unexpectedly complicated and strangely comforting. The women stayed in the old toolshed, refusing the house out of humility, though Luke noticed they cleaned it each evening when he wasn't looking. Joey adored them. Ayanna taught him how to track rabbits in the dusty soil, and Marala showed him how to weave grass into little braided animals he kept proudly on the windowsill. At first, Luke tried to keep emotional distance, telling himself this was temporary. But every time he saw Joey laughing in a way the boy hadn't since his mother died, something in Luke's heart cracked open a little more. The turning point came in late autumn, when a bitter wind howled across the plains and tore shingles from the barn roof. Luke climbed up to fix it, but before long his ladder slipped, and he fell, landing hard on the frozen ground. Pain shot through his leg, sharp, electric, and the world blurred into shadow. When he woke, he was lying inside the house, a blanket draped over him, the scent of warm herbs filling the air. Ayanna sat nearby, grinding roots into a paste, while Marala checked his injury with practiced care. "You were lucky," Marala murmured. "Your leg isn't broken. But you won't be walking right for a while." Luke tried to sit up, shame prickling under his skin. "I should have been more careful. Joey, he needs me." "And he has you," Ayanna said gently, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "But even the strongest men need others sometimes." He looked away, fighting the burn of tears. Since his wife died, he had carried every burden alone, believing that was what a good father did, never crack, never falter. Yet here he was, saved by two women who had every reason to walk away but chose kindness instead. Over the next weeks, with winter tightening its grip, Ayanna and Marala stepped into the quiet spaces Luke couldn't fill. They cooked when he couldn't stand, split firewood with swift, sure swings of the axe, and tended the horses with a tenderness that reminded Luke of his late wife's hands. Joey blossomed in their presence, asking endless questions about Apache stories, traditions, and the meaning behind the songs they hummed while working. The farmhouse, once hollow and cold, now glowed each night with warm laughter and the crackle of fire. And somewhere between the shared meals and the quiet conversations under the starlit sky, Luke realized the truth. They weren't just helping him survive, they were helping him heal. One night, as snowflakes drifted silently over the land, Ayanna stood with Luke near the barn, gazing toward the distant mountains. "I know this isn't our home, not anymore," she said, voice heavy with emotion. "But thank you for letting us stay longer than we deserved." "You deserved a place to feel safe," Luke replied. "That's all any of us want." Ayanna smiled sadly. "My aunt and I will begin searching for a new place when spring comes." The idea pierced Luke unexpectedly, sharp and painful. The ranch without them felt like imagining the sky without stars, possible, but unbearably empty. Weeks later, as the first signs of spring thawed the land, a letter arrived from the county. Luke's heart sank as he read the fine print. The backfields of his property, land long disputed and ignored, were being reassessed for potential development. If approved, bulldozers would rip through the very ground Ayanna and Marala's ancestors had walked. That night, as he sat by the fire with the letter trembling in his hands, he looked at Joey sleeping on the couch, a woven grass animal by his cheek, and he made a decision that felt impossibly right. The next morning, he hitched up his truck and drove into town. The clerk at the county office looked bewildered when Luke placed the signed petition on her desk. "You want to designate a section of your land as protected tribal heritage?" "Yes," Luke said firmly. "And I'd like legal titles granting usage rights to Ayanna and Marala." "But, you just bought this ranch. You'd lose a good portion of it." Luke nodded. "Some things are worth more than acres." The clerk studied him, then stamped the papers with finality. "It's done." When Luke returned home, Ayanna and Marala were outside, repairing the chicken coop. He approached them with the documents in hand, nerves buzzing under his skin. "I want you both to stay," he said simply. "Not as guests. Not as a burden. But as part of this ranch, part of this family, if you'll have us." Ayanna stared at him, eyes filling with tears. Why would you do this for us?" Luke swallowed hard. "Because when I was broken, you chose compassion. When Joey was lonely, you chose kindness. You taught us that a home isn't built with wood and nails, it's built when people show up for one another. Now it's my turn." Marala, usually so composed, pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "Our people have lost so much," she whispered. "But today, we gained something precious." Joey burst out the front door then, running full speed toward them. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" he asked breathlessly. Ayanna knelt and hugged him tightly. "Yes, little one," she said softly. "For as long as you'll have us." Over time, the ranch transformed, not just in structure, but in spirit. Luke recovered fully and rebuilt the farm stronger than before, with Ayanna and Marala working beside him like lifelong partners. Joey grew up surrounded by stories older than the fences, learning to respect the land not as property but as sacred memory. And every sunrise, the family, because that was what they had become, stood together on the porch, watching the light spill across the fields that now belonged to all of them, stitched together by compassion, sacrifice, and the unspoken truth that the world becomes gentler when people choose kindness over fear. Years later, when travelers passed by and asked how such a wounded, abandoned farm had become a place of warmth and harmony, Luke would simply smile and say, "Because once, we opened our door to strangers. And they walked in carrying the missing pieces of our hearts." And in the end, that was the story of the rancher, the boy, and the two Apache women, not a tale of ownership or charity, but of the powerful moment when one act of compassion changes the direction of many lives at once. A reminder that sometimes the family we need is the one we never expected, and that humanity, at its best, is nothing more than choosing to love what the world has forgotten.